Production support for this episode of InFocus is provided by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity to Central and Southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
There are around 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, according to the Pew Hispanic Center, and about 110,000 of those live in Indiana. Now, Congress is seeking to provide those immigrants a pathway to legal status. We'll discuss what options are being considered and what immigration reform could mean for Indiana on this episode of In Focus. And thanks for joining us for this edition of In Focus. I'm Stan Jastrzebski. A group of 8 lawmakers are working to create an immigration reform proposal to be voted on in Congress. WTIU's Gretchen Frazee has more on how that measure could affect Indiana.
The so-called Gang of 8 is proposing legislation that would provide a pathway to legal status for undocumented immigrants currently living in the U.S. Indiana Senator Dan Coates says he supports the group's efforts, but he emphasizes the bill must also include tougher penalties for those who violate the law.
We tried to do it before in the mid-'80s. It didn't work, so let's learn lessons from that. Let's secure those borders. Let's tighten up the employment verification system and do a number of other things before we rush to judgment on who ought to be admitted to as citizens and who shouldn't be.
Laura Aziz, an immigration attorney with Indiana Legal Services, says at its base, the problem is the process to obtain legal status is too complicated and lengthy.
I have one client who is from, I just looked up the visa processing times for her if she would like to sponsor her brother who is from Mexico. And right now the processing times for her to sponsor her brother is about 20 to 22 years.
At a recent soccer game between Mexico and Indiana University, Laura Valdivia helped her father sell T-shirts and souvenirs. She supports an immigration overhaul, but like many, she still has some concerns.
I'm really excited because my parents are going to be able to have an opportunity to stay here legally, but then it's a risk because some people, they're sending them back for a couple while until they get their papers and then they can come back. But then some of the people are like, they only send them back, but then they don't give them the papers. So it's kind of like, it's confusing.
Coates recently attended a naturalization ceremony in Indianapolis where 82 people took the oath to become U.S. citizens. He says no matter what comes out of immigration reform, it will impact Indiana.
We're far from the border, but we're still a state of immigrants, and we see a number of immigrants. We had people here from 36 different countries here in Indiana taking the oath to become a citizen. And that is a story, whether it's Indianapolis or any of a number of our locations throughout Indiana. So we all have a stake in getting this done right.
Those who attended the ceremony can attest to the need to getting it right. For them, earning citizenship was a major achievement, and they say they hope immigration reform will allow many others to do the same.
It's a great honor for me to be a citizen of the United States, and it means a lot to me. It's a long journey, starting way back in 1998 for me.
I am very fortunate because I am married to an American citizen, so for me it wasn't a problem necessarily. But the question is, how do you make it more fair and easier for those individuals who don't enjoy the same privileges and weren't as fortunate as I was?
I think it's the best time for me because my kids, they grew up and I have something to do for myself. So most of them, they are in college and my daughter is in high school. So I think it's time for me to go to study and do something for the country.
And we're joined in studio tonight by former Republican lawmaker and current Hirons & Company Senior Vice President Mike Murphy, also Lewis and Campus Immigration Group Director Angela Adams, and Tim Wynn, the manager of Immigration Legal Services for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. Thanks to all three of you for being here. Let me just ask a general question to start, and we'll get a response from all of you, starting with Mike and going down. Give me, in your own words, the state of immigration in Indiana and where it might need some changes, if at all. Mike, we'll start with you.
Well, it's hopeful. I think it's getting better. And sometimes out of defeat comes hope. And I think when the Republicans were trounced in the national elections in 2012, all of a sudden they realized that they will never win another national election without the Hispanic vote, or at least a good portion of it. And so you saw a lot of what I call deathbed conversions. You saw leaders in our state legislature, leaders in our congressional delegation, and leaders in the Republican Party nationwide all of a sudden saying, you know what, now we're going to be pro-immigrant, whereas 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago we weren't. And so there's been a sea change in the political environment here in the United States that Republicans are finally recognizing they have to get with it, and the immigrant population is going to outpace the growth of the so-called white population over the next 20 to 30 years. And you're either going to be with it or you're going to be left behind.
Angela?
I think Mike's right. We've seen a huge shift this year from last year, and in great part to the election. This issue has historically and recently been polarized and been dominated by the extremes, by the extremist groups, and on both sides, on the far left and the far right. And now I think, for the first time, we're really seeing a shift back to the middle. And so that moderates, conservatives, people who maybe don't find themselves siding or agreeing with the extremes, but agree that something needs to be done on the issue of immigration, are really finding their voice. And I think that's very important because, you've seen a group of, we call Bibles, Badges, and Business, faith leaders, law enforcement leaders, and business leaders coming out who really in the past haven't been vocal on the issue, and now are really coming out and saying, hey, we do want immigration reform, and we need a common sense solution to the problem that exists today, and we want to encourage and support members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to get it done.
And Tim, what about from the charitable and social service side? What does immigration look like to you as far as Indiana is concerned?
Well, I would agree with the two that I feel like from both sides, people are coming together to bring about immigration reform. From a service, provider standpoint, we constantly see those types of people coming in asking, what can you do for me? How can I get legal status and things like that? So there's definitely a need out there. What I would also bring to the table is what I'm nervous about is that immigration reform will be passed, but the benefits that are provided to the immigrant with this new legal status, that the service providers are not actually going to be equipped or ready for it. Driver's license, colleges, things like that. I'm a little nervous that they're not going to be prepared and know what that means. And we're already starting to see that with a deferred action for childhood arrivals, the legislation that passed last year.
Let me ask you a little bit about that and get a general response from all of you. If you're someone who's watching this show and you're a Hoosier, why should you care about immigration reform? How does it affect the average person who's not trying to come to this country or doesn't have a relative who's trying to do that? I'm curious what each of you think is a reason that someone should care who's watching this program. And Tim, we'll start with you and we'll come back this way.
Well, it matters because, those are your neighbors. Those are the residents of Indianapolis and Indiana. They affect not only public benefits, they affect employment. So I would just say that it is your neighbor, pretty much.
Angela?
Immigration affects everyone. We all come from somewhere, and I think also, looking at the biblical perspective, as Tim said, this is your neighbor. These are, the stranger among us. We must welcome them. From the business perspective, you've got employers who, these are their employees. They're very valued employees that they can't do without. And from that perspective, it's really an economic argument. And so, when you say, what about me? How does immigration affect me? Back to law enforcement, another example is, just public safety in general and wanting to be able to identify people who are here. We have a lot of people here who don't have any form of identification because they're undocumented. We can't identify them. We don't even know. We can't track them. So we need that stepped up enforcement, the tracking mechanism, but we also need a way for employers a path for employers who want to do something for their employees to get them lawful status. And back, the economic argument is really the strongest and really relates back to everyone, U.S. citizens as well, is immigration is good for the economy. It's good for everyone. It actually has been shown to increase increase jobs, and over time, we've seen studies that say by having a common sense immigration reform, we could increase the GDP by $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. So, you know, it could be that real shot in the arm that our economy needs to kind of get back to good again.
Stan, I would just paraphrase Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush says that the strength of our country has historically been in immigration and the talent that it brings to our shores, and we are crazy to turn one of our strengths into one of our greatest weaknesses, and that's what we've been doing over the past 15 years. And we need to get back to having immigration and the talent that it brings with it to be one of our core strengths again.
Let me get back to that in a second. Angela, I wanted to go to something you were saying. You, we should point out, were a lawyer on the case that recently came down that struck down part of Indiana's warrantless search law. And you said we need to track people. We need to know who they are. And yet that seems to kind of go against, in some ways, what you were arguing when Indiana passed the law that mirrored SB 1070 in Arizona that said you could stop people and you could ask them to see their identification. Is there a disconnect there between needing to be able to follow people and track them and being able to say, show me your papers, as it's become known in Arizona?
I think that's a great question. And I think there's a huge difference between show me your papers and deputizing local law enforcement to enforce the immigration laws is very problematic, because it actually undermines their role of what they're actually there to do to keep the public safe and build community. But I think, you know, yes, I think we need to identify people, but also have kind of a national, we can't just have patchwork legislation all over the United States. We have to have framework, consistency across the board. So I think, you know, really important to have people identified, but you can't, and part of the lawsuit was it allowed them to arrest people who were not committing crimes, who were not criminals. The three plaintiffs and the class that they represented were not committing any crime. And that was why the lawsuit was so powerful, because they weren't doing anything wrong. They were actually given permission by the federal government to be here. And so the way that the law was written, it would have given law enforcement officers the ability to arrest people for non-criminal offenses who were perfectly able to be here under the federal government. It was actually going beyond what the federal government had allowed law enforcement officers to do.
Mike, let me go back to your statement just a second ago, and you were talking about Jeb Bush pointing out that one of the strengths historically of the country has been that we are a nation of immigrants, and I think it would be hard to deny that. So let me ask you, have we gone from a situation where, like it says in the Statue of Liberty, give me your poor, your tired, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, to a point where there are a lot of people who say we need to keep a lot of these people out? And there seems to be a sea change, a shift from the former to the latter, and it sounds like you're saying the latter is kind of a dangerous place to be.
Well, the history of immigration in the United States has also been a history of ignorance. And when we are ignorant of a group, whether it's Irish people or Polish people or African Americans or Hispanics, we tend to discriminate against them. In the late 1800s, you had the Chinese Exclusionary Act, which essentially assumed that all women of Asian origin were prostitutes. And so it banned Asian women from coming to the United States. In the early 1900s, there was a large influx of Eastern Europeans, you know, Serbs, Poles, Croats. What happened? There was a legislative reaction against those people. In the 1850s, all Irishmen were thought to be drunks. And so there was action against Irish people. And so whenever you have a large group, a large influx like that, you have ignorance. Here, the face of immigration, like it or not, is Hispanic, even though there's many different types of people from many different countries who are here both legally and illegally. And so it's important to understand that first of all, the anti-immigrant crowd is a minority in itself. They tend to be, as Angela said, they tend to be extreme, but they also tend to be very vocal. And the great mass of Americans, quite frankly, the great mass of Hoosiers, believe in orderly, what I would call constitutional, humane approaches to immigration. And what we've seen, and thanks to people like Angela and other attorneys, is we've seen a change since 2006 to just 2 months ago when the Supreme Court refused to take up the Alabama appeal. We've seen a slow progression of what I would call common sense, pragmatic rulings by the federal courts that are finally coming to the point where they're defining what is constitutional, and they're coming down on the side of saying across the board that immigration is a federal area for purview, not for the states. And I think that is another sign of hope.
So let me ask you about that, and I'm curious about all three of your opinions on this, because there have definitely been people who have said this is a federal issue, we need to let the federal government handle it and the state should stay out. There have been people, on the other hand, in Indiana who have said, including, I think, Attorney General Zeller at one point has said, clearly the federal government isn't doing enough, and so we in Indiana need to step up. And so you have these two groups that seem to be at odds about whose job it is to fix what the problems are. How do we go about solving who's going to fix it in the first place, and then reconciling what the federal government might want versus what states feel is in their best interest? Tim, I'm going to start with you on this one, because I think you might be kind of at the spear's edge on this in terms of helping people in a social service capacity get to finding ways to solve this problem.
Well, kind of to his point, on a more personal level with individuals, I mean, I see in my office, you know, people that are coming in that have had some sort of status, or they've been here for 20, 30 years, and literally the legislation has changed as they've just been living their lives here. So, you know, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, it was no big deal to go back and forth from Mexico to the United States, not have a passport stamped, just come and go as you please. And yet all of a sudden, you know, now there's issues where you can't do that anymore. So they find themselves in a world that has changed dramatically from when they first came. So I think that is, number one, a big issue. But as far as the federal versus state, I think that for this at the state level, I think the advocacy is important. I think that's what, and ultimately it's going to happen, is the states are going to continue to say, like, we need to have some responsibility on our shoulders. But I think that ultimately that's just going to be advocacy, and I think at the federal level it's going to happen.
What about the other two of you? What about on the Indiana side of things? I mean, do lawmakers and leaders in Indiana need to back off of this?
Well, I think they've been told by the federal courts to back off as of just a couple of months ago by Judge Sarah Evans Barker, and Angela's the expert on that. But I will tell you that the legislators in general, and I was one for 16 years, try to listen to their constituents. And it's no coincidence that a lot of the backlash against immigrants has come during bad economic times. When people feel threatened of their personal safety, their job security and things like that, they tend to lash out against people they don't know and people that don't look like them. I mean, last time I checked, there were 55 to 60,000 illegal Irishmen in the United States, but I would never be pulled over and asked to prove that I was a citizen of the United States, even though my name is Murphy and I'm Irish. And so what happens is people react against that. Legislators are reacting to that reaction, and so they are frustrated with the federal government, and it's clear that the federal government has failed. So they are reacting, trying to legislate in areas that they have no authority to legislate, and the federal courts are slowly reining them in.
You mentioned a little while ago that you thought it was a vocal minority of people who were in the send them back camp. I wonder, we talked earlier about a law that was passed by, let's face it, a Republican-dominated legislature in the state of Indiana. Same thing in Arizona. Do you get blowback from your former colleagues, I'd be interested to know, who are still in the legislature, who say, Mike, how can you be so forward and so public about believing these things that we don't seem to, at least as far as our legislation is concerned?
Well, I don't want to criticize them personally, because they all have their own reasons for doing what they do, and I don't ever question their motives, because I think they're all honorable, generally speaking. But I will tell you that in 2006, when I began this fight, I began it for two reasons. One is I knew I was right on the, as Angela would say, on the moral side of the law. If you read Matthew 25. It's very clear what Christians and all religions are really called to do, and the way that they're called to treat their neighbors. If you look at it from a purely political standpoint, all you had to do is look 10, 15 years down the road, 20 years down the road, the demographics. And I knew as a political being also that if the Republican Party and the Republican legislature didn't get on the right side of the trends, we were going to be long-term losers. So mine was both a moral fight and, quite selfishly, a political fight as well. And what I've seen is my fellow former legislators slowly coming in our direction. Guys and ladies who you would consider to be very, very far to the right, coming to me quietly and saying, you know what, I didn't agree with you 6 years ago, I fought against you, but now for this reason or that reason, because I've come to know a Mexican family in my church, or because I've come to see that my friend who's an employer can't hire the right kind of people unless he has these kind, immigrants. They're coming around slowly, and I think the federal judges are pushing them that way and saying, stay out of it, let the federal government take care of it.
You mentioned the politics of the issue. I wonder what we think about the idea that this has become such a political football that goes back and forth, and that's why you have this gang of 8 people, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, who are trying to find some sort of compromise. Do we need to depoliticize this to actually find a reasonable solution that works both for the immigrants and for the economy and for the individual states? Angela, you're shaking your head yes.
Oh yes, definitely. I think it needs to be depoliticized, but I don't think that it will be. I think that, as it's politics, and it's that simple. I think that politics sometimes translates into it's the right thing to do. And when both coincide, that's a beautiful thing. And hopefully that's what will happen here, is we'll see people doing something political that's also the right thing to do. But I want to echo something that Mike said, that I think, and going back to also Tim, the deferred action for childhood arrivals, a lot of things have happened recently which have brought people out of the shadows. And what Mike alluded to is, our legislators a couple years ago may never have met an undocumented person, thought that they were criminals, thought that they were bad, and that is slowly, the perspective is changing because, again, they have come to meet someone. They have met Victoria, the undocumented student that can't get in-state tuition. They have met, an employer who can't fix their employee's immigration status. And so by bringing people out of the shadows, and what deferred action has really enabled a lot of young people to do, is to come out and be confident and tell their story.
So you're talking about a process where it sounds like you are dealing with lawmakers one by one by one. You have to deal with individual lawmakers and get them to come to your side. Why haven't there been good enough arguments to get these people to come to some sort of understanding en masse? Why is there this very slow, deliberative process that seems to be the only way to make this happen?
Well, there's important issues here, and no side is completely right. And there have been big failures ever since the 1986 Act. There have been failures, and there have been abuses of the system. And as Angela will tell you, that the system has never been quite right. You don't have enough visas in one area and that kind of thing. But go back 50 or 60 years. This is not a whole lot different than the civil rights movement of the late 50s and early 60s. Lyndon Johnson was very opposed to civil rights until he realized he couldn't become president unless he was for civil rights. And then he switched his position and became the great hero of the civil rights movement. Go back and read his speeches from the late 40s and early to mid 50s. He was very resistant to civil rights.
So let me ask you this then.
It's a political process, as Angela
You
said.
say people are coming to you slowly and quietly.
And individually.
And individually.
Yes.
You say that there are people who were against this before they were for it. Is this a disingenuous thing we're doing? Are people still actually politicizing this more because what they're still worried about is winning an election down the line and not actually reforming immigration for the better? Well,
I don't think it's talking about politics down the line. I think they're thinking about politics next year, their own re-election quite often. But set that aside for a second. I think there are people of goodwill who are sincerely concerned, who are slowly having the veil of ignorance lifted from their faces. And as Angela said, it's because they meet a woman like Victoria, who I think is from Ellettsville, right? She's from right near here. Bloomington, yeah. She's from right near here. And she, in the last 2 years in the legislature, has been a very powerful, articulate voice. And we've seen very conservative legislators listen to her and then go back and rethink their positions, which is what they're there to do. They're there to listen to all sides and then think their positions through. And to their credit, they have not let their previous positions or entrenched philosophies dictate their vote in the long run. And that's encouraging. I think you're going to see more and more of that.
And also, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're realizing that people in Victoria's family are constituents. So Victoria's parents are constituents. They're voters. Her father's a U.S. citizen. There are many mixed status families here who are a combination of unlawful status and permanent residency, non-immigrant, whatever, overstays, so a couple members of the family will be voting and their voices need to be heard. So they're recognizing that the voting population or their actual constituencies are impacted by this.
And I was just going to mention, talking about bringing people out of the shadows, I also think that that's important just for the constituents, because politicians are constantly worried that their voters are not going to like the change that's going on. Mm-hmm. So I think that we have to advocate to the constituents and to your average citizen, your average resident of Indianapolis or Indiana. And I think by doing that, by bringing them out of the shadows, people can see those stories. Mm-hmm. The victimization that might happen while people are invisible here. So I think talking about tracking people, I think that's not only good for the United States, Indiana, but it's also good for them because they're no longer victimized by the police officer or by other people.
Let me ask you, Tim, I've been thinking about this for a few minutes. Do you ever feel from the charitable side of things that you are sort of caught in the middle here between wanting to help people and whatever the political climate is? Do you feel that you're kind of just waiting to see how the sands shift beneath you?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell people we operate within the law. That's my job. On a national level, of course, we're affiliated with Catholic Charities USA, United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. We're affiliated with these national organizations that do take a stance, that do lobby for the humane actions, for not necessarily condoning unlawful presence, but condoning and advocating for humane ways of bringing this to light. So yeah, I do feel like we're sort of stuck in the middle. We don't do a lot of the advocacy. We leave that up to our affiliates, but we kind of just stick with whatever the law says right now, we do it. But we do have a lot of people that come in that at this point, we cannot do anything for them, I send them to Angela.
Well, I think that's a situation that it sounds like there are a lot of people in where you've got a lot of complex mechanisms that people fit into one space or another, or indeed fit in a couple of different categories, and it's tough to make individual choices for each person. But I thank the three of you for being here and helping us to kind of cope with some of these issues, because it's one of these topics that's going to stay around. It's going to be politically interesting. It's going to be interesting for how the makeup of Indiana changes. So thanks to all three of you for helping us out with that. And if you'd like to see this show in full, you can leave a message or leave a comment at our website, indianapublicmedia.org/infocus. I'd like to thank all of you who watched and who listened, and have a nice night.
Production support for this episode of InFocus is provided by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity to Central and Southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.